Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. It's Friday. If you're listening live, it's raining. If you're listening back, hopefully the sun has come out for you between now and then. But very excited because today we are talking about my favourite topic, which is teaching. And I'm absolutely delighted that we've got a very special guest coming to talk to us today, an expert in the field of teacher training. So without further ado, good morning,
Morning,
Jenny.
Poppy. Hi, can you hear me?
Yay! I can hear you perfectly. Hi.
How exciting. Great to
How
be here with you
exciting.
today.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. How are you?
I'm well, I'm good, thanks. Could do with a bit more sunshine, but I'm good. I'm glad to be speaking to you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we are absolutely delighted because I'm just so keen. I've got so many of my students, Jenny, looking at getting into teacher training. They're looking at different pathways. So I'm hoping you can clear up a lot of questions for us today, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. It's that time of year. There's lots of stuff in the news as well, which I suppose we might touch on. And it's actually quite a contentious topic in education. And I know you have a big following for Teachers Talk Radio on Twitter. So I'm sure people will have a view on what we're talking about, which is great.
Definitely. And yes, just to say that if you are listening live with me and Jenny up till 12 o'clock today, you can type questions in the live chat and I can put them to Jenny at the end of the show. So do feel free to get involved, type your message on Podbean and we can ask Jenny. So I guess before, and I'll be honest, Jenny, I've got quite a list of questions for you. As I've got your expertise here with me. But I thought maybe could you please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us about your career journey up to this point, please.
I will do, love to. So, yes, I'm Jenny Fogarty. I'm currently Director of Initial Teacher Training at Anglia Ruskin University, ARU. So I cover the 3 sites where we'll be rolling out ITT from September 2024. So that's across the Eastern region, Chelmsford, Cambridge and Peterborough. And I've had that job not for very long, actually. I started it in March this year, but I've always been involved in ITT. But I started myself, I did a BEd back in the day, as we say, back in the early noughties, and I qualified and taught in Hertfordshire and Essex schools, and I became a deputy head quite quickly, and then I was doing a couple of acting headships. Both my deputy head roles, my heads took long-term sick, unfortunately, and when you're a deputy head, you have to act up. So I did that for twice, and then that was
Twice as
quite
well.
intense. Yeah, I know. You can't get more unlucky than that. And I was still very young at the time, but I was doing my master's degree alongside it. So I studied at the University of Cambridge for an MEd in leading teaching and learning, and that was back in the day when the local authority paid for it. So I was lucky enough to have that paid for through the local authority, but I had to apply, and it was quite a rigorous process to get on that. But that was the HeartsCam leading teaching and learning degree, and there's still a big community now, so shout out to all those colleagues because they were brilliant. That was a really transformative learning experience for me. But I did have quite a kind of bumpy leadership time. It was really intense, and obviously acting up is a lot.
Twice.
And twice is a lot. And I took some time out and went and taught overseas. I taught in the Caribbean, had a break, and then when I came back, I thought, okay, what can I do with my skill set? I don't really know if I want to go back into school. I'm not sure I want to do headship anymore. And I had some great colleagues and friends around me that said, why not try teacher training? Why not get into teacher education? So I did that for a good few years in London. I led the PGCE school direct route at London South Bank. And then after about 5 or 6 years doing that, I took a sideways move and I started working at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which is an amazing niche small university that nobody had heard of until COVID. And these guys do amazing work around public health and public health education. And I was an assistant professor in learning and teaching there. So I used to work with colleagues who were kind of doctors and public health specialists, helping them teach their master's level students. So I basically ran like the PG Cert in higher education, but I did it for doctors and medical colleagues and public health and allied health, loads of really amazing international colleagues as well. And it was a really good opportunity for me to kind of use my skill set in a different context. And I think that's something we might pick up on today, is that, often teachers think I can only teach in a school, whereas actually you have amazing transferable skills. And sometimes it's about thinking laterally about where they might fit. And I loved that job at LSHTM. I really loved it. And met amazing colleagues, taught overseas, went out with the UK Public Health Rapid Support Team that were brought in after Ebola and did capacity building work. And it also allowed me to do my other passion, which was teaching in prison. So I know, Poppy, you have had experience with Inside Out, which is a prison education program, and I did Learning Together, and I used to teach in Brixton and Pentonville prisons, and loved that, and did a lot of good work there. And then COVID kind of came along, and lots of us thought, what do we want to do? How do we want to do things differently? Lots of colleagues at LSHTM went back into clinical roles, so the work really kind of changed. And so I took what I call a professional sabbatical. I took a year out to work in my local hospice, and I helped them with the move to digital education. So all their education and training that they used to do for end of life care, they had to turn it online. And obviously, as you can imagine, during COVID, there was a big demand for helping people have good deaths. And it's something that I've become very passionate about since my experience at the hospice. And then I was looking for another role after that year. So I did some part-time work. I was freelancing, and then the opportunity to work at ARU came along, and I'd been the external examiner at ARU for about 5 years and have known colleagues there for a long time. So I was delighted to be involved with this work. So that's quite a long answer to your question, Poppy. Sorry.
Wow. No, I mean, that was an amazing answer. I feel like I need the Jenny series on Teachers Talk Radio, because I want to ask you so many questions about everything there. I mean, thank you for sharing that with us, first of all. And one thing I just have to ask you about that you mentioned, and I think I got this right, teaching in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So
tell us more, please, just before I get onto the list of questions.
Well, that was a kind of slight detour, but I got a job in an international school. So, that job was advertised on the TES, like we all see jobs when we're teaching. And I just thought I need to do something completely different. There were lots of aspects in my life that I wanted to change at the time. And I just thought, I'm going to go and try it. And I'm sure you've got listeners that have done expat teaching. It's a very different way of teaching. I taught on a tiny island called Canouan in St. Vincent in the Grenadines. And I suppose all I can say is it was an experience, Poppy. It was definitely an experience. And it was an opportunity for me to really sit on the beach and think, what do I want out of my life? And I did do the teaching, and I enjoyed it, and I met some very cool people and had cool experiences. And I was, ready for that. It marked a kind of transition point in my life where I moved from classroom teaching into academic work. And for me, having a sense of belonging has always been really important in my roles, and feeling like I'm connected to the values of the organisation that I work with are really important. So that's why I love being an academic, because I get to work with people who are very values driven, and that's why teaching's so great.
Wow, I love this. And I also just love that the universe, made this pathway for you, and now you're here with us, inspiring the next generation of teachers. So amazing. So let's move on to talking about teacher training then, because I know I've got lots of my students at the moment that are listening in and want to know more about teacher training. And one thing that they've been asking me about are the changes that are coming in to teacher training from September 2024. And I wondered if you could please tell us a bit more about what that means.
Yeah, so from a student perspective, it shouldn't actually mean that much. It shouldn't make too much of a difference to them. But there was a big market, what they call the market review of teacher training providers last year in 2022, and it was a very challenging time to be a provider. Still is a challenging time to be a provider, because actually providers had to reapply to the Department for Education to be accredited to award qualified teacher status, and their applications were reviewed in quite a cloak and dagger way, not a very transparent way about what they were looking for. And then there were 2 stages where the government announced who the providers were going to be from 2024. So everybody who will be delivering qualified teacher status or awarding qualified teacher status, they've been reaccredited. But actually about 20% of providers were not reaccredited.
Wow. And so like a fifth. Wow.
Yeah, a huge proportion of both school-based providers, so the SCITs, and HEI university providers. And we're talking about providers with very long, well-established histories of excellent teacher education right across the country. And they reckon it will work out that we'll be about 9,000 places down from in
Oh my
2024.
goodness.
Yeah, so it's a big change, and it's really been a big shake up, and it's not been uncontentious. So it's really changed what the landscape's going to look like. Of course, the DFE remain committed to a schools-based agenda, so lots of skits. But we know that university providers have a really amazing history and legacy of really combining excellent research and theory with the practice and the long-term relationships with schools, whether that's through CPD, masters, as well as teacher training. So, I'm very proud of university-based teacher training, and I know we'll have listeners that feel very strongly about that as well. So it's a big change. And so what might look different for potential trainees is that some of the providers who they thought they were going to do their teacher training with aren't doing it anymore, or they might be in new partnerships. So some of the providers that weren't accredited have partnered up with regional other providers to become what we call a lead partner. So they might be delivering aspects of either the curriculum or the school-based training. So it's actually a little bit messy. So it's important to ask that question if you're going to go out and look for a new training provider, or you want to train to teach, asking the question of who's accrediting this? If that is important to you, that's definitely a question that you can ask, because
I guess that means that's where you'd have the graduation at the accrediting. So this happened to me actually, Jenny. So when I was teacher training, I was at Edge Hill University, but it wasn't a university yet, it was Edge Hill College. And I didn't realise, so it was accredited by, I think it was Lancaster, and I had to go for my graduation there, and it felt really strange because, we'd all spent 3 years on campus, and then we had to go to this other university for the graduation. So I guess that's a really good thing just to check and be aware of.
And it shouldn't really matter day to day. My sister did a ballet degree at the Royal Academy of Dance, and she was accredited by Surrey, so went out to have her graduation in Guildford. It was the first and only time she ever went there. But it is just something to ask if you're interested in what's happening. It's good to know why and how and what difference it's going to make to you as a trainee.
Definitely. And then just to pick up then, you said, about a fifth of providers weren't reaccredited. Does this mean it's much more competitive at the moment to get onto teacher training places?
Well, we don't know is the real answer to that. I'm sure some people will tell you they do know, but I think we don't know, because the landscape in terms of how people are partnering is different. So they're making potentially cuts in some areas, but they'll grow in other areas. So the number of places as well is different to the demand for teacher training, so that we know actually primary holds up pretty strongly and is quite steady year to year, but in secondary subjects they're not meeting recruitment targets, so there's not this number of trainees coming in. But like all these things, if it's something you're passionate about, we would always encourage potential students to apply early, because there is uncertainty in the landscape. So it's definitely best, particularly if you're thinking about an undergraduate route like a B.Ed, to get that application in early, because those have always been traditionally very competitive routes compared to PGCEs.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. That's so helpful.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
So welcome to everyone who's listening. So we've got lots and lots of listeners online this morning. You're here on Teachers Talk Radio with me, Poppy, and we are talking to an expert of teacher education, Jenny Fogarty. Hello, Jenny.
Hello, Poppy. Hello.
So we've been talking this morning about some of the changes to teacher training. But I'm really interested to pick up on your journey, because you were telling us earlier on that you started out as a teacher, but now you're working at university level, and you moved into being a teacher educator, and now your current role. How and why did you make that change? And I know a lot of my students say to me, how did you end up going from being a primary school teacher to working with adults? What was the journey for you, Jenny?
Well, I think for me, what was really a pivotal point was doing my master's. I don't know if you agree, Poppy. When you do your master's and you have an opportunity to research an area in depth, it really brings you alive in a different way, I think, in terms of your career. And there are often opportunities linked to that where you can contribute to the university where you're doing your master's. So, you know, you might be asked to present your research, or you might be asked to go along to a seminar or be part of a kind of broader research community that's in higher education. So I had that strand. And then I always had the strand of having my own trainees. So being a class teacher, deputy head, having a class and having trainees from the university or the local provider coming in. And I used to love that. Kind of mentoring and seeing people grow and develop. And the university tutors used to come in and I would say, how do you get to do your job? I'd love to do this. How do you get to go around and visit other schools and talk to people? And they'd say to me, you need to do your master's. If you want to work in higher education, you must do your master's. But then go back to your universities, go back to contact local universities and see if they're looking for people. They're always looking for people that might want to be interested in teacher education. So when I came back from the Caribbean and decided that this was the route I was going to take, I was just applying for jobs. I needed to work. I didn't want to go back into school. I think when we have these moments of transition in our life, we always tell ourselves as teachers, well, I can always do supply. You know, I could always be a supply teacher if I needed to. And of course you can do that. And that's a great way to kind of think about what you want from a school. But I knew I didn't want a full-time school-based role. And so I applied for jobs. There's a great website called jobs.ac.uk, which has higher education jobs in it. And teacher education roles were coming up and I just applied for it. And I think what people need to remember if they're coming out of school is that your school experience has such a high value in universities and particularly in teacher education. You know, that credibility in the classroom with trainees is definitely really valuable. And people like me and you, Poppy, we get further and further away from that, right? So that's why we diversify what we are into and our research to bring in other skills. But our colleagues that come in straight from school, of course, it's a transition. It's a huge transition. But it's a really worthwhile one, and it gives you an opportunity to do all the things you love about teaching with less of the things that you don't love. And actually teaching adults is not that different. So I think people think it's way different.
Yeah,
it's actually not. You know, are you a good communicator? Can you explain things? Can you enthuse people? Can you inspire and get people talking about stuff that they're passionate about? Yes, we can do all of that as teachers. And
can you still use your teacher stare when someone's going on Instagram at the back of the lecture theatre?
Excuse me. Yeah. Yes, we can still use all those skills. But you know, lecturing is a skill. I remember the first time I stood up in a lecture theatre with 150 students in. That is different than doing assembly. You tell yourself it's the same. It is different. You have got to remember things. But the great thing about working in good universities is that you'll have an amazing team around you that will support you to make that transition. And I think that's really important. But you know, I did have to have my master's. I did have to have an idea about research that I wanted to develop and contribute to. But actually, I think just taking a leap of faith, just thinking like, this is the environment I want to be in. This is what I want to do. And that's always been a theme for me throughout my career is if I don't like something, I'll change it. And I think often I meet with teachers, particularly at the end of the year. My husband is still a teacher in school. He's an assistant head in London. And I will go to the pub at the end of the term and I'll say, if you don't want to do it anymore, do something different.
Yeah.
You know, and feeling empowered to make that change. Sometimes people think, what could I do? And teacher education is a great way of keeping alive all the things that you love about the classroom. And you're still going into primary schools if that's your thing. You're still visiting secondary settings if that's your background. You're just doing it in a different way. Exactly.
That's such good advice, Jenny. I think you're right. A lot of those skills are transferable, whether you're teaching a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old. And another really good advice there, Jenny, take a risk. And I know a lot of teachers at the moment, we've seen a lot of strikes this year and they think it's teaching for me. But the fact that you trained to be a teacher and you have been teaching, there's clearly something in you that enjoys that role. And you're right, Jenny, maybe it's about thinking, do I need to be in a different classroom, in a different space, working with a different year group, even adults. And so really good advice. I think for those teachers who might be feeling disillusioned, don't think that means you're not meant to teach anymore. Maybe you're just meant to teach somewhere else and something else, right?
Absolutely. And there are
or maybe the Caribbean,
lots of ways.
Which I'm wondering why.
Maybe the Caribbean. Maybe the Caribbean, but maybe not, right? Maybe it's not, lots of people are embedded in their communities. They might have families. They can't move. They can't do what I did and get, up sticks and leave. But you can talk to colleagues that are doing interesting jobs around you. That's always been a real thing for me when I felt a bit stuck in my career. It's looking at my professional network, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's people in real life, and saying, you're doing something interesting. Can I talk to you about how you got there? And I find often that is really transformative for me in my thinking, is to just think, okay, right, I just need to slightly reframe this or move in another direction, or just think about what I really do enjoy, or what am I not prioritizing, and just taking that time out. I like to do a little kind of career MOT after Christmas every year, where I just think, am I on the right track? Is this going in the right direction? What could I do differently? And you don't have to be a teacher to do that, but I think it's just, there's something about being intentional and not just letting the years drift away, because in school, before you know it, another academic year has gone by.
Yeah, because you're always just looking for the next half term, the next break, aren't you? It just whizzes by. And I think that's really good advice. As you say, Jenny, for anyone listening, whatever your role is, or if you're a teacher, just think, what is the future? And obviously we want to live in the present. That's really important. But think, where would you like to go? Is there a subject you want to specialise in? Or particularly, like you said, Jenny, about doing your master's, about doing your PhD. Like a lot of my students, when I say, one day you might do a PhD like me, and they laugh, they snigger, and I'm like, no, but you might not even know yet. When I was 18 in the classroom at uni, I did never think I would do a PhD, because I'd pretty much hated education my whole life. But as you grow and change, that's part of the beauty, is embracing who you are now. And so definitely,
absolutely.
And I think involved, it's find out masters, and
not shutting down options, not saying, oh, I could never do that, or I hated this. Maybe you've changed since you were studying at uni 20 years ago. Maybe you feel
maybe uni's changed as well.
Absolutely.
University has changed in a big way.
Absolutely. And you can do it in small stages. We have roles in ARU, and other organisations do as well, where you could be a lecturer practitioner, so you could still maintain time in the classroom, but you could be teaching in university 1 or 2 days a week. That's a great way of trying it out. Or doing a part-time master's, just taking it one module at a time, not feeling overwhelmed with it, but just taking it bit by bit, and before you know it, it could open up all sorts of other doors in your career and your life, actually.
Wow. Oh, that's so inspirational. And I love that, Jenny, because actually my very first master's I did through an online provider, and had my baby at the same time. And weirdly, my master's was my me time. And I know there are some of you listening that will get it. Actually, when you are a busy educator, getting to just sit on your laptop and type an essay is your you time. And it's so empowering.
Absolutely.
Really empowering, particularly, for parents and carers.
Yes, absolutely. And, some of you from your theoretical learning of your teachers will know the theory about flow, and how you get into that kind of headspace, and you want the classrooms where the children say at the end, oh, when the bell goes. That's, when do we have moments like that for ourselves, And I think often research and reading and writing about things that you're passionate about, for me, they are my moments of flow, where I can completely be absorbed in something. And that's, they're very precious moments. And, we get an opportunity in teacher education to stop and think, while still always, being aware of the very real pressures of what it takes to be a teacher, and we're kind of straddling two areas, I think, and that's really exciting.
So true. I love that. So before Jenny convinces me to sign up for another degree, we are going to jump to the news. So Jenny, don't go anywhere, and we'll be back with you in about 7 minutes time. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports that the school run by Ruth Perry, who took her own life after a critical Ofsted, has been rated good after a new inspection. Ms Perry died in January after receiving news her school was being downgraded from outstanding to inadequate. Ms Perry's death prompted an outpouring of anger about the inspection system, although Ofsted defended its grading process and said one-word gradings would not be scrapped. The latest report comments on the work done by the school to address previous weaknesses. The new report raises again the question of high-stakes inspections. MPs are to hold an inquiry in the autumn and will look at how the system is working. Ms Perry's sister, Professor Julia Waters, said in a statement, "The reversal of the previous judgment in a matter of months illustrates why schools should be given the time to correct weaknesses before the final report is published, and that the latest judgment proves what all of those who knew Ruth and the school have known all along." Last month, Ofsted announced some changes which allow schools that were given an inadequate rating over safeguarding to be re-inspected within 3 months, giving them a chance to be regraded if they have addressed concerns. Teachers' pay has been in the news again following 2 further days of strike action from teachers in England. The Daily Mirror reports that Education Secretary Gillian Keegan is continuing to be under pressure to publish pay proposals or risk strikes dragging on even longer. All the major teaching unions in England are conducting fresh ballots after rejecting a £1,000 one-off payment for 2023 and an average 4.5% pay rise for next year. The government referred the decision on pay to the pay review body, who has reportedly recommended a 6.5% pay rise, but the DfE continues to refuse to publish the advice. The Guardian reports on Labour's plans for education should they win the next general election. The article itself focused on plans for early years, which could see more graduate teachers working in nurseries and more nursery places in primary school settings. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said she wanted to put early years on an equal footing with schools to give children the best start in life. The TES gave further comment on Labour's plans as the party set out how it plans to boost teacher retention and improve standards. The plan includes giving early career teachers a one-off payment of £2,400 for staying in the profession and sending regional improvement teams to help schools. New teachers will be required to have QTS, and they will also improve recruitment by cutting costs. The party, currently in opposition, has not made any comment on teacher pay. Finally, the BBC reports on what it describes as a crisis in waiting for children in care. In March, the government extended a ban on unregulated homes to children in care aged 16 and 17. This followed a BBC investigation which found some had been forced to live in caravans and barges, and some had experienced abuse. The crackdown begins in October, when Ofsted will begin inspections, and all unregulated care settings will become illegal. However, some local authorities fear they will have to continue the use of unregulated accommodation, usually in houses and flats in residential areas, because they will have no alternative. Regulated placements are suffering chronic staff shortages, and a squeeze on places at the same time as a rise on numbers of children coming into care is causing continued issues. A DofE spokesperson said it was the responsibility of local authorities to provide safe placements, but that it was investing £142 million over the next 3 years to ensure the transition to Ofsted registration is successful. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to support a question everyone will see at the start of next year. It goes something like this. Hi EduTwitter, can you reply with where you are so I can show my class how far a post on the internet can reach? With a bit of free tech, you can make this much more visual. I'm going to use Google Maps because it's free and most likely you'll have used Google Maps at some point in the past. So, when you have all your responses, sign into Google, go to Maps and click on the menu next to the search box. That's the 3 lines that look like a burger. From the menu, select My Places. You'll now have 4 options: Lists, Labelled, Visited, and Maps. Click on Maps and at the bottom select Create Map. Now you can give the map a title so you can find it next year for comparison and add all the places from your Twitter replies. Simply type the name of the place. When it appears with a blue point marker, you can click the plus sign to add it to the map and then select the colour to help it stand out. When you've finished, all places will be saved and you can access the map by following the first few steps: Menu, My Places, Maps. There are loads of other great tools to use also. Measure the distance from your school to those places, hit preview and go into the view only mode. Here you can select a place and you're treated to a short bio and an image of the area. So next time you're looking to bring a lesson to life, why not try using maps to help pupils see where places are in the world? Do you have any top tips for mapping? Why not get in touch and tell us what you want to know about tech? I'm Steve Woods and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Friday morning break with me, Poppy Gibson. And this morning we have got a very special guest, Jenny Fogarty. Jenny is an Associate Professor of Education, as well as being the Director of Initial Teacher Training at ARU Essex. So welcome back, Jenny.
Hello, Poppy. Hi, everyone.
Welcome back. And a little shout out. We've got lots of listeners joining in, typing in the studio this morning. We've got Gareth listening in. We've got Mark. Mark sent me a lovely comment over the break, Jenny, to say that doing his masters was really valuable for him as a parent as well. So, and he's just told me actually he did it on coaching and leadership. So very interesting.
Mark. Yeah,
thank you, Mark. So, Jenny, we've got about another 20 minutes together. So I've just got a few more questions to put to you, please, about teacher training.
Sure.
Great. So before the break, we were talking about getting into teaching, maybe even becoming a teacher educator like us. But I want to kind of go back a bit to really some of these challenges we're seeing in the sector at the moment around teacher recruitment. And I know some people talk about a teacher crisis. I'm just kind of interested, how do you think these might have changed over time? How have the challenges in teaching maybe changed since COVID? What's your kind of perspective as a very experienced educator?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting time to be having this discussion. So grateful to the team at the NFER. They do a lot of good work each kind of every period, not every month or so, looking at the trends and the data around teacher recruitment. But also we've had an education select committee this week where colleagues from the sector were presenting to the government their thoughts on, is there a crisis? What is happening? And what we see is that, teacher retention bubbles around the 10%. So 10% of teachers drop out each year, and that has been pretty steady. So I think there's a lot of interest in it seemingly have increased at the moment, gone up to 12%, but actually nobody moved during COVID. That's what we saw. People didn't leave their jobs during COVID. It wasn't the same kind of round of recruitment in and out. And so as we know, in all areas of society, things are taking a time to level out and to find what the new balance is. So in terms of retention, I think it's always going to be a challenge in the sector, particularly post-COVID, because of the issues we have around flexible working. And I think people more broadly in work have new opportunities for flexible working. I'm a big proponent of what we call agile working. I move around, I'm based all over the east of England. So I have time at home, I have time on campus, but we just don't have that kind of same flexibility in in our roles, in school, and that can be a challenge. And I know that the government are trying to work hard with heads and leaders in the sector to understand how we can bring more flexible working, and I think that will bring a good benefit. And of course, pay is an issue. Rishi's announced that they'll accept the recommendations yesterday. For some people that won't be enough, and that's a real concern. And I think potentially we're just storing up more issues as we continue to see pay eroded over the last 10 years. And I think that's really something that we've got to look at, particularly where subjects for recruitment get good or big bursaries. So some subjects for teacher training, particularly in all in secondary subjects, but specialist subjects like where there's shortages, maths and sciences and areas like that, they have big bursaries attached to them. But if we're still seeing people drop out after a year, then that's not a good use of public funds either. So we need to be really thinking about how teacher training courses are preparing trainees to have long and full and rich careers in the profession, and knowing that those careers might look different over time, right? So how can we build in flexibility to help people see all the different possibilities? Because we want to support people. I've never met a trainee who on day one didn't want to make a difference. So what happens that in a year, 2 years, 3 years time, they suddenly feel they're not able to make that difference. And we have to help people understand, what are the levers that they can pull themselves to put themselves in a position where they feel they are able to make a difference.
Perfect. So this kind of leaves me, I've got a really direct question I want to ask you. But before I do, just reflecting, so as you know, Jenny, I did a 3-year primary teacher course specialising in child psychology with QTS, qualified teacher status. So I was really lucky that I knew I wanted to teach. So my first degree had qualified teacher status attached, and so I had placements, and really enjoyed the placements. Didn't enjoy, I realised I've already named and shamed, didn't always enjoy the teaching, but that was about me, not about the institution. As someone who's neurodivergent.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. As someone who's neurodivergent, I don't always find it easy to kind of access and stay engaged with the material. So, but it was that drive, like you say, that drive to make a difference, that drive to want to be a teacher that kept me engaged. And luckily, here we are, however many decades later, still teaching, just in a different way. My question for you, in your opinion, what makes a great teacher training course?
I think a course that is about the students and the pupils that they will serve, that is grounded in the difference you're going to make, you will get a sense of that. If you're a prospective trainee going out, hearing people at open day, if it's less about the institution and more about the work, more about what difference it will make to you as a trainee and what difference you will then make as a trainee on the lives of the pupils and the children in your community, that is a good sign. So often you go around and people are, navel gazing, telling you how amazing they are as an institution and how brilliant they've got so many researchers and how much they're doing themselves. Actually, it's not about us. It's about you. It's about what you need. It's about how the course can adapt and support you to be the best teacher you can be. And I say this a lot in my team, that our job is to serve the work. It's not about us positioning ourselves as the font of all knowledge. Come here, you will learn from these amazing experts. It's about saying you will become the best teacher you can be through the opportunities and support that we provide you. And everywhere you go, you will hear people talk about their research. Some of it will light your fire, some of it won't. That's great. That's great that you've got people that are researching. That's literally their job, right? That's what they get paid to do. So what you need as a potential trainee is to understand, what is the benefit to you as a trainee? What difference is this going to make to you in your practice? And also to recognize that whether you're doing a 1-year PGCE or a 3 or 4 year undergraduate course, life happens. Life gets in the way of any education you undertake. Where's the safety net underneath you? What does that look like? You might think, I'm never going to need that. I don't need student support. I didn't access any of it on my undergraduate course. Still ask those questions. Still understand what happens if things go wrong. Things go wrong for all sorts of different reasons. And you need to know that you're going to be in an environment that's going to support you and challenge you. Of course, you want to be challenged and we want to push you as hard as we can, but also be there every step of the way to say, this is the nudge you need. This is what we are after from you. And this is the support we're going to put in place, because teaching's a tough old business and it's really tough to be a trainee. And we want to get you through the course and that 120 days in school. So really focus in on, can you hear them talking about students and trainees and children and young people? If they're talking about NSS scores and league tables and funding and, you know, facilities, maybe it's not the right environment for you. Maybe you want to go somewhere where there's an amazing sports centre, fine, but think about what is important to you before you get there, because, you know, you'll be surrounded by people that can talk a good talk, but actually our job is to support you. That's what it's about. It's not for us to come and toot our own horn and blow our own trumpet. Yeah, it's really, for me, about us serving the work.
I love that. And I think that's true even when you become a teacher, you know, finding the school that fits for you. So this is the same, isn't it? Find the institution that's going to fit you, fits your vision and values. Jenny, one thing I want to pick up on that you mentioned there, you said, you know, whether you do an undergrad training course or a PGCE, for our listeners, you know, who might be looking at getting into teacher training, could you please just clarify what is the difference then between a BEd, I guess that's a Bachelor of Education,
that's right,
and a PGCE? Could you maybe just tell us a bit about like the difference?
Yeah, so there are lots and lots of different ways to get into teaching. Too many for that we've only got maybe a few minutes to go, so too many for me to go into.
Next time we'll have you back for part 2.
But you can train to be a teacher through an undergraduate route or a postgraduate.
That was like
route.
what I did, right? But mine was a BA, so mine was a Bachelor of Arts.
Yeah, and that's common too. It's about the QTS bit is the most important bit. The BA, the BEd bit is kind of used interchangeably. BEd is a shorthand in the sector for an undergraduate primary education degree with QTS. So when people say I did a BEd, what they mean is they did a 3 or 4 year undergraduate primary education degree with QTS, so with qualified teacher status. So that's the kind of shorthand that people use, but it can be a BA. It's the QTS bit that matters. So do you do an undergraduate course where your subject is education, so you become an expert in education? Or do you do an undergraduate course in a subject like English or maths or physics or psychology, and then you train to be a teacher through a postgraduate certificate in education, so a PGCE? And often a PGCE is 60 master's credits. And that's at level 7. So that's at master's level or postgraduate level. But both those routes, that's the academic bit. What you're looking for is the qualified teacher status part. So do they award you qualified teacher status? And that's really the training program that underpins how you learn to become a teacher. And that is where we teach you all about pedagogy, the how of being a teacher. We teach about adaptive teaching. We think about assessment. We think about your role in the wider community. And that from 2024 is also much more closely aligned to what they call the core content framework. So that's almost like a curriculum for teacher training. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop explanation. But you've got either undergraduate routes where you're really embedded in education, or you've got postgraduate routes where you learn, you train to be a teacher on top of your subject expertise, but you have to have a degree to become a teacher.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for clarifying, Jenny. And did I hear you say earlier the number 120 days? Is that like
That's
how many days you have to do on placement? Is that the same like whatever training route you go down?
Yeah, that's right. So on a 1 year course, you have to do that in 1 year. So that gives you an indication of how much time you would spend at university compared to how much time you would spend in your school setting. And then on an undergraduate course, you do that over a 3 year or 4 year timeline.
I see.
Yeah, so often on an undergraduate course, you would do more than 120 days because we would build in some flex in case you were absent or something happened and you needed to do extra days. But on an undergraduate course like the one I'm developing, you do 3 8-week placements, one each year. Whereas on a PGCE, you have to do it all in 1 year. So PGCE is a very, very full-on training year.
So I guess, it's back to what you're saying, like think what would work for you. And some people thrive under that pressure, don't they? So it's kind of, thinking what works for you. And like you say, have a chat with the institutions and think what would fit your lifestyle.
And think about where you're coming in. So if you've already done your undergraduate degree, you probably don't want to do another one, right?
Yeah.
So you want to think about what's the quickest way of being a teacher. But I think really be mindful if your own consideration is speed. What's the quickest way? Because they are very intensive courses, whether they're undergraduate with QTS. Anything with QTS is a very, very intensive way of learning to be a teacher. That's part of it. That's part of how it's designed. So you have to be in a really good place, kind of all aspects of your life. I used to say to my trainees, you need to literally get your house in order.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Whether that is who's going to look after your dog, who's picking up your kids, have you got meals in the freezer that you can access easily. Like it is challenging, so as much as you can do to prepare for it, which is why we would always encourage people to apply early, because then you've got a nice long lead in time to get ready.
Definitely, get organised. Yeah, I like that. Get your house in order, then you get your classroom in order.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenny. You'll be pleased to know I've only got 2 more questions left. I feel like we've covered a lot though this morning.
What's the direct one? That's what I want to know, Poppy. You've said I would need to ask you a very direct question. Have
that
you
was me
asked
it? No, it wasn't anything too spicy to say. That was me just wondering what you thought made a great course, but I totally agree with everything you said. I mean, had I known you wanted more challenging questions, I would have prepared. So we've just got a few minutes left. The next thing just really that I thought would be really useful to share with our listeners, because we've spoken about, these days in school. Could you just tell us maybe a bit more what role then that schools and school-based mentors have to play in teacher education?
Yeah, they're vital. We couldn't do teacher education without schools and without the partnership we have with our school colleagues, because school-based training is absolutely imperative. It's really, really, really an important part of what we are doing, and it's an important part of how you learn to be a teacher. We of course we love the theoretical side, but the practical application is what underpins everything. So schools will be part of a training program, whether that is through a formal partnership and they are a placement school, or they might contribute to the teaching. So that's another way of thinking about how you might become a teacher educator, is you could do one-off guest lecturing sessions in universities, which is really something that you could think about as well. But yeah, I think there is something there about you really being clear. Sorry, Poppy, I've lost what I was going to say. I've lost the thread of my thought there. Can you re-clarify the question for me?
Yeah, of course. I know it's been intense one of questions for you, but
it has.
You're just reminding us how vital the school and the school mentors are really in supporting our trainees.
Yeah. Of course it is. Sorry, I'm doing well to get to just before the end of the hour. Thanks, Poppy.
And it is Friday morning, so we'll let you off. Right. We're always a bit like that on a Friday here on Teachers Talk Radio.
So schools and school mentors, they really important. You can get involved either through the delivery of the curriculum, but obviously the placement is the most important part.
Yeah.
So hosting students for placements is a really integral part of how we work well with schools, and part of that is having a mentor. So from 2024, the requirements for mentoring have significantly increased. So all mentors have to have at least 12 hours of mentor training, and I think that's really important for me to clarify that on this platform, because it's not the universities or the skits that are saying you need more training. That is a new part of the requirements. So for us to be compliant, everyone has to have 12 hours before they even meet their trainee. And then we have to be able to guarantee that they get somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a week of mentor support. So that's a lot. It's a big demand on schools, and we really
reassuring, for people going into it.
It is really reassuring. If you're
I don't think I had that much. I don't remember having that much mentor time. So yeah, that's really reassuring.
It is. And we really, it's really important that providers are working with the sector to help people understand what the requirements are, so that it's not super burdensome on schools and the workload demands for existing teachers, but also recognizing it's a great skill set to have. Mentor training really upskills you as a practitioner in lots of areas of teaching, not just working with trainees. So would really encourage people to think about whether they do that through an accredited route. So some of the work we'll be doing will get master's credits for that mentor training, but actually really engaging with it, because it makes you a better communicator, it makes you a better listener, it makes you a better able to problem solve. So partners, school placements, absolutely vital. So again, if you're looking for teacher training courses, do ask your colleagues, how are placements working? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What schools do you work with? How will I know that I'll have a really positive experience? Those are all good questions to ask.
I love that, Jenny. Great. And just great to know that there's such good support in schools at the moment for trainee teachers. So we've got the final 60 seconds and my final question. So if we've got any prospective trainees listening, Jenny, and they're thinking about getting into teaching this morning, they're thinking about what to do for September, for next year, for the future, what is your advice? What are the key things that they should be thinking about before they enroll on a teacher training programme?
Okay, so 60 seconds. So you need to be thinking about why. Why do you want to do this? The why is going to see you through from now all the way through your career. So being really, really clear on that why. Have you got the qualifications that you need? Look on the Get Into Teaching website. Just put that into Google or your search engine, and it will tell you what requirements you need in terms of GCSEs. And if we had more time, I'd go into it. But all of that you can find online. Think about where you want to train. Do you want to stay at home? Do you want to live away from home? What are the implications of that for you? And then think about, have you got a good understanding of what it means to be a teacher? Talk to some teachers that you know, put it out there on social media, ask the questions, and really clarifying that why. If I'm interviewing potential trainees, if they've got a strong understanding of what they want to get out of this job and what they think they can contribute, as I said before, to serve the work, not about them, to serve the young people that we work with, then they can be trained pretty much anything. I can teach you how to manage behaviour. I can talk to you about assessment and work with you to get that right. I can help you understand SEND. You don't have to be an expert on that before you apply, but we do want that passion, that enthusiasm, and that clear articulation of what contribution you want to make. And I would say, go for it. It's the best profession in the world.
Oh, I feel like I'm welling up, Jenny. What amazing advice. It's so inspirational on a Friday. Thank you. And hopefully we'll have lots of people now deciding to sign up as a result to all the amazing teacher training opportunities out there. So thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. And I just have nothing else to say but to wish you a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much, and great to speak to you, Poppy, and the community that you have around you. So do continue the conversation with us, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you've got. So thanks very much. Great to be with you.
That's so lovely. Thank you, Jenny. You take care. And to everyone listening, and thanks, Gareth, who's just liked the show with about 10 seconds to go. Really great to have you all here with us. If you're listening back, hope you enjoyed the show, me talking to our wonderful guest, Jenny, here today, and I'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. Enjoy the weekend.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.